Hello and welcome to Cars Like Your Car Brochure channel, and in today's episode, backed by popular demand, part 2 of the Leyland Cars all model catalogue. Hello and welcome back to Cars Like. If you're new to Cars Like is a car brochure channel here on YouTube looking at car brochures from around the world for the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s and sometimes beyond that as well. So if you're interested in cars, car brochures, car facts and of course memories of cars gone by, please consider subscribing. Anyway, back to today's episode. Yes, it's part 2 of the Leyland Cars all model catalogue for 1977. Last week we had a little bit of an introduction, had a look at the front cover, the back cover and the first car in the range, the Mini. And I asked the question, shall we continue with this series, because it is a absolutely huge brochure and the range of cars in 1977 for British Leyland was vast. Seems to be an overriding shout of yes, please continue with this brochure. I think a lot of people have got the same sentiment as myself for these British Leyland cars. Yeah, we amuse ourselves thinking about the panel gaps and the poor body build quality of these cars, but overall we've still got really good memories of these cars, and I think we all wish they did a little bit of a better job, they handled the money a little bit better and they were still around today. But all we can do is look back, and that's what we're going to do. So let's throw the brochure on there and see what is the next car. And here is today's brochure, as we remember from last week, this unusual image of all these Leyland cars driving around this sort of symbolic road that represents the badge, the plug hole of dismay. But yeah, it's an interesting cover. A few people asked, was I joking about this cover? Actually, I quite like the cover. It's quite a arty brochure. Yeah, the cars are all zooming off in different directions, and obviously wasn't drawn on the picture to start with, but obviously that is the way it was drawn. Very much of its time. I mean, compared to the brochure front covers that were drawn for the 60s and 50s brochures, there were extremely talented artists. This is a different style of art, of course. Anyway, so last week we looked at the Mini. If we actually missed last week's episode where we looked at the front cover and the rear cover, and indeed the introduction with the Mini and the Mini Clubmans and the Mini 1275 GT, I will do a link at the end of this video, and in fact once we've got all the episodes in there, we'll link them all together. So like I say, if you missed the first episode, I will do a link at the end. It doesn't really matter too much if you watch them in the wrong order, really. So what is the next car in this Leyland Cars brochure? It's our friend the Maxi. The nice thing about the Maxi, and sort of when they brought out the Mini Clubmans, like the family resemblance was quite good with this front end and these sharing these indicators with the Mini Clubman. The problem with the Maxi was by 1977 it was a pretty old looking design. It was produced by Austin, then by British Leyland, and it ran from 1969 to 1981. So certainly by 77 it was getting a bit of an elderly design. By 1981 it was an ancient design, to be honest with you, but it was quite a clever car in that it was the first British car to feature a hatchback body design. It had certain compromises though, and first thing we'll do though, we'll zoom in on this front image and then we'll have a look at some of the text. And here it is. I always quite like the design actually of the Maxi, but certainly unusual proportions, and I think one of the reasons why it reused the door panels from the Austin 1800 Land Crab, so almost like a smaller Land Crab, that unusual wheelbase. But like I said, I did like the fact that it was a hatchback at a time when we really needed a hatchback. Of course, hatchbacks were becoming more and more popular, but there's no doubt by 77 this was a pretty elderly looking car. If we think about cars that were around at the time, I mean, the Golf came out in 1974 and the Golf GTI was out by now, 1976, which, you know, it shows how far behind this was. And really, by this stage, really the Metro really should have been coming out. I think that's what they needed, a Metro, to compete with things like the Golf. The range was a bit all over the place. They had a lot of cars, did Leyland Cars at this time, but they were kind of like elderly designs, and they were kind of like holes appearing that in the range that really needed to be there. So I think something like a Metro would have been something they should have had at this time. Now this is 77, but I looked at a little bit of facts on the old interweb, and in 1971 to 1972 the Maxi was the least stolen car. Good, because, you know, your Maxi's still going to be there on the driveway when you wake up in the morning. But bad, does that mean it was quite undesirable even by 71, 72? Anyway, let's have a look at the brochure and let's have a look at some of the text to sell this car. So text wise, it says Maxi, practical, versatile, roomy and economical. You can join the ranks of the multi-car families with just one car, the Maxi. That is the essence of this practical and astonishingly versatile Leyland model. It can be what you want it to be, do what you want it to do, all with reliability, economy, style and performance you'll find hard to beat at the price on either side of the channel, or even further afield. And there's a choice of 3 versions, each having the same principal design features but varying in engine power and equipment provided. All Maxis have 5 doors, 5 forward gears and accommodation for 4 to 5 people. So I mean that certainly is a selling point in 77 to have this car that is a 5-door car, as in it's got a hatchback at a time when people really wanted hatchbacks. And yeah, they were pretty quick to jump on board with that. It's just a shame they didn't make more of it with more models and more up-to-date models, and certainly 5 forward gears was well ahead of the time. The interior is normally that of comfortable, roomy saloon, complete with rear parcel shelf and separate enclosed boots, or the shelf can be removed to provide inside access to luggage. Fold the seat forward and you have an equally comfortable, fully carpeted estate with a gross load space of something like 51 cubic feet. So yeah, has anyone actually measured it? It's something like 51 cubic feet. Recline front and rear seat backrests. Again, nice feature, that's it. Recline front and rear seat backrests. And there's another transformation, a double bed. And you're surprising actually when you look at cars in the 70s. A few cars actually had this feature where you kind of like, you folded the front seats down, it made like a flat area, like a bed. I don't know who wanted this or did anyone use this feature, but there we go, a double bed. And then it introduces the range as a whole. So we've got the Maxi 1500 and 1750, your tow car, and the Maxi HL. I think we'll start with looking at the Maxi 1500 and 1750, and then we'll come back to the HL, but let's start at the text here. So there are other important features common to all Maxis, like the transversely mounted engine driving the front wheels. Again, I feel that's a little bit ahead of the time, having these as a front wheel, and obviously because of the design of the car, certainly roomy for the overall size. The arrangement makes for excellent road holding and stability under all conditions, but it does more than that. It allows so much more space within the car's compact overall dimensions for driver and passenger to sit in uncrowded comfort. Then there's the hydroelastic independent suspension for smooth and easy riding, servo assisted brakes, discs on front for smooth and easy stopping, and that 5th gear for smooth and easy cruising with greater economy and less wear and tear. The main difference between the 1500 and the 1750 model is in the engine. Both units are built for economical and reliable operation, but the larger version has a higher power output and proportionally higher performance. Also on the 1750 is the choice of automatic transmission as an optional extra. The transmission has an overriding manual control, so you can still do your own gear changing if you should feel so inclined. The images are a little bit of a peep inside of this blue example, and I must admit I do quite like the interior. That sort of wood look dash, and very straightforward dials and seats that look reasonably hard wearing. And in the back, enough room for you to read a story to your stuffed dog. So, it had everything for a family. Images, sorry about this, it's a bit on the crease, so it's not the best picture in the world. An example in red and this rather attractive version in blue, which actually really suits it. And obviously if you looked in the showroom and it was parked like this, the hatchback open, I can certainly see why people would have gone for this if you liked a more traditional looking car, but the practicality of an estate without having to have a huge estate car certainly had some advantages and a certain amount of sellability. It goes on to tell us about the higher spec version as well, the Maxi HL. If you're looking for something a bit special in the versatility field, Leyland have thoughtfully provided the Maxi HL. The head of the Maxi family has all the practical characteristics of the other variants, plus some extra ones of its own. A higher compression 1748cc twin carburetor engine, for instance, to give highline performance. Extra interior equipment includes nylon fabric seat panels, padded vinyl fascia, simulated wood gear lever knob, companion box on each front door, and electric windscreen washer. Exterior identification is by HL badges and distinctive body chrome mouldings with black PVC inserts. And this apparently is the Maxi HL. And the Maxi HL interior, still no head restraints though, which is a little surprising for the top of the range highline model. Dashboard, it certainly looks a little bit different, doesn't it? Doesn't have that same wooden dash, and look at that steering wheel. A very sporty steering wheel, doesn't really match the car, almost like something you would pick up at the Halfords parts bin. So that's a bit of an unusual touch. Like I said, I don't think it really, you would certainly never look at a Maxi and think what a sporty car. So I don't know if that really matches, but there we go. You could have had this more expensive model. So then we get to the Maxi specification. I'm not going to spend too much on this. Maybe we might have a time for one more model in this brochure. So we've got the 1500 with a 1485cc 68 bhp engine, the 1750 with a 1748cc 72 bhp engine, and it's kind of like hard to see because it's on the crease sadly, but it's still a 1748cc for the HL, but 91 bhp with the twin SU HS6 carburetors. So yeah, I guess it was the sporty model really, but still I find it hard to look at a Maxi and think about a sporty car, particularly when you got things now like the Golf GTI that have actually arrived. They've all got a 5-speed gearbox, which is very interesting, and if we move down, they all feature this disc drum setup and that hydroelastic displacers interconnected front and rear. So a typical British Leyland suspension setup. And then if we go down, they've got such features as a speedometer, water temperature and fuel gauges, warning lamps to show low oil pressure, headlamp main beam flashers, hazard lamps working, no charge, heated rear window, brake line failure lamps. Optional extras, we could have auto transmission for the 1750, and the other optional extra is for the HL we could have metallic paint. Very nice. The next model in the range, of course, is the Wedge, or at least the next colour in the range according to this 1977 brochure is the Princess. Not the Austin Princess, just the Princess, showing the 2200 HL on the front cover. Let's just zoom in on that. And here it is. I actually quite like the design of the Princess, I must admit. I always liked that 70s Wedge design by Harris Mann. It was, I don't know, very much of its time, and certainly this colour is very much of its time, this brown. Here it is in 22HL model with a lovely vinyl roof. Unusual model actually, the Princess, because it was still a front wheel drive design, unlike many of its competitors. Certainly give it a big advantage with the space on the inside. Overall, the size was kind of like in between sort of a Cortina and a Granada sort of size, but lots of room inside because of that front wheel design. So it was quite a clever idea. I think the main failing was that it wasn't a hatch. And again, 70s, late 70s, everyone wanted a hatchback. Lots of the competitors now had started putting hatchbacks on their larger cars as well. So I certainly think this was a failing of the Princess. And it's also interesting to know that Harris Mann did originally pen the design to be a hatchback, but that was scrapped for rather a silly reason. A reason so it wouldn't compete against the Maxi. It was always strange how they was always very protective over the hatchback being only on the Maxi, which certainly was, I think, a bit of a failing and a bit of a short-term look at the company as a whole. And of course, Leyland Cars, British Leyland, etc. You wondered sometimes about the management, and I think ultimately the failing. You could, a better management, maybe they might have succeeded, because there's no doubt they had some interesting designs, and the Princess was certainly one of those. Ran from 75 to 81. These original ones went from 75 to 78, and then we got the Princess 2, and then of course later on we got the Ambassador, which came with a hatchback but really was far too late. Anyway, let's have a look at the text. Now you've got to admit some of this wording in this brochure is quite amusing. I think this Princess is no exception. It amusingly starts by saying, descended from a truly noble line of princesses. This latest holder of the title is also a car of fine distinction. Have you ever thought of these princesses like that before? In its lithe and purposeful appearance, the roominess and all-embracing comfort of its five-seater coachwork, in the manner of its going and the interest it attracts everywhere, this Princess is perhaps the most distinguished of them all. Really? It is very much a car of our time, uncompromising and built to a high standard. There are 4 models in the Princess range, 2 powered by a 4-cylinder engine of 1798cc capacity and 2 by a 6-cylinder overhead camshaft unit with a capacity of 2227cc. Engines in all versions are transversely mounted and drive the front wheels. That is why you get the exceptionally spacious passenger and luggage compartments, and why the cars are so stable and controllable on any type of road. Add the Hydrogas independent suspension and you can judge what sweet running, smooth running motor cars these are. The next page again, as this brochure shows us some really nice images of the cars from their time. We'll start by reading and learning about the 1800 and 1800 HL, and then we'll move on to the larger engined models. The Princess series begins with the 1800, a car of considerable style inside and out. As soon as you step through the wide doors, you know that everything feels right, that you can relax and keep your cool even on the most exasperating journeys. All seats have nip-backed, expanded vinyl on their wearing surfaces. Front seats have reclining backrests, and the driver's seat is adjustable for height as well as the usual fore and aft movement. As you would expect, the 1800 HL offers something extra. Distinguishing marks include vinyl-covered quarter panels and a coach line along the body sides. Inside there are seats trimmed in cropped nylon, a folding centre armrest for the back seat, floor console around the gear lever, grab rails and coat hooks in the rear compartment. On the move, you and your passengers will appreciate the indefinable feeling of exclusive luxury that stems from painstaking design. A little bit of a look in the inside there, very much 70s, isn't it? That unusual coloured dash. This particular one is that base 1800, very unusual steering wheel design, I think. And then we'll have a look at similar sort of story, and surprisingly still no rev counter. They didn't offer a rev counter, which is a little bit weird, even on this one, which is the HL model in a different unusual colour. It's like we got a clock instead of a rev counter. And then a bit of a comparison between the two interiors. Left there we have the standard model, on the right that is the HL. Apologies, it is on the crease, but there's a look at the higher spec 1800, the HL, with that sort of weird idea of just putting that vinyl panel just on that rear quarter panel rather than the entire roof, which is a little bit unusual. Then this appears to be an 1800, but the lower spec version, note no vinyl rear quarter panel. And then we'll have a look at this one, and we'll get to the 2200s in a minute, but this is the 2200 HLS, all of the luxury. It goes on to tell us at the top of its class is the 2200 HLS, the most exclusive of the Princesses. Here is a car possessing all the eminent characteristics of its illustrious sister models, with the additional specification that makes it even more special. There is the lively yet economical 2227cc 6-cylinder engine, complemented by a responsive 4 forward-speed gearbox, power-assisted steering, and dual-circuit servo-assisted brakes. Then consider the deeply upholstered seats with their soft velour plush facings, the expensive moulded carpets throughout. Unusual to call them the expensive moulded carpets throughout. Even the boot is carpeted. Take note of the walnut veneer fascia, the excellence of the overall trim, and the extras like push button radio fitted as standard. And aided by the effective insulation, you'll find the Princess 2200 HLS a haven of peace and quiet. The companion 2200 HL model is similar in most respects to HLS, but with a different detail specification and a price difference that might make all the difference. We haven't fitted a radio, for example, and the seat facings are cropped nylon instead of a velour plush. But you get the same performance and ride qualities and the same admiring glances as you drive past. Another look at the HLS, and you can just about see that it has got a vinyl roof, not just on the quarter panels now, but all the way over the roof. You know, real luxury. And then on the inside, this is your top model now. I'm not even sure that's got a rev counter on it, but look, we've got a radio, and look what a fine radio that is. Seats do look very nice though. Still no head restraints though. So the specifications, again, I'm just going to pick some key points out there. So the 1800 had a 1798cc, 82 bhp. The 2200 was 2227cc. twin SU carburetors, 110 bhp. Same with the HLS as well by the looks of it. Gearbox is just a 4-speed now, unusually. You know, the lower Maxi was a 5-speed, remember? Unusual, front wheel drive, like I say. Moving down, I picked out the instrumentation for that top of the range 22 HLS, so we get a speedometer with trip recorder, water temperature gauge, battery condition gauge, electric clock, fuel gauge, warning lamps to show headlamp high beam, flashers working, no charge, low oil pressure, seat belts not fastened, brake line failure, hazard warning lamps working, and heated rear window on. Coach work, if we pick something on there, so it's got reclining front seats, fresh air demister, air blend with 3-speed fan, driver's seat with height adjustment, floor console, rear seat folding centre armrest, velour seat facings, which may be worth going for the HLS, vinyl covered roof and tinted window glass. And then some of the optional extras on the left there is the HL, and the HLS is on the right. So HL options, we could have auto transmission, metallic paint finish, head restraints, could be an option, laminated windscreen, tinted window glass, vinyl covered roof, or you could have the full vinyl roof, de novo wheels and tyres. And for the HLS we could have extras such as auto transmission, metallic paint finish, head restraints, laminated windscreen and de novo wheels and tyres. Next week, if you wish, we can have a look at the Austin Allegro, the next one in the range. I don't know really if this is in any particular order. I guess they're probably lumping Austins together after this. Economy motoring in the grand manner, apparently. So there we go, the Princess, really a car very much flawed by build quality issues from the start. And of course, 70s, so lots of industrial action. So you've got a reputation for being quite an unreliable car, but typical in these cars, you know, a bit like the SD1s, they kind of like got better over time. But if you throw a car out there that gets a reputation for being unreliable, it kind of like unfortunately sticks with the car, because I actually like the design of the Princess. I know, if you read some magazines, they call this a really ugly car. They say things like, did the person who designed the front talk to the person who designed the back? But, I like the car, and I certainly take my hats off to British Leyland for building things that really didn't look anything like anything else on the road. And you certainly have to appreciate that, because otherwise you get all the cars looking exactly the same. We also this week looked at the Maxi. Fortunately by this time a very old-fashioned looking design, but when it first came out, a hatchback. I can see why people really bought them. Unfortunately, the bad thing about the Maxi was, because they coveted this hatchback design, cars like the Princess, no, we can't have another hatchback, that's the Maxi, which made no sense as far as I can see. Anyway, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you're enjoying this series, and of course many more episodes of other cars, makes and manufacturers in the future. So if you haven't done already, please do consider subscribing. It is completely free. I've also added in a couple of little additional episodes, one for this particular Leyland Cars series, and another little box there that you can click on to show you other makes and models of car. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, all the best, and goodbye.